Hi, I'm Jim Klug with Yellow Dog Fly Fishing.
I'm Sam Mebane.
We're going to be talking today about fly fishing in Europe, some of our favorite destinations, some of Yellow Dog's programs, and we're going to be answering some of the questions we most often get when people are thinking about a trip to Europe or planning or researching a fishing package in Europe. Sam, what are some of the most common questions that we get when people are kicking around the idea of fishing in the old world?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, there's a lot of great places to visit and fish in Europe. Jim, what are your top 3 places and why should they be a draw for anglers?
Well, that's a good question. I'm really excited about Yellow Dog's Europe program. We started building it up a number of years ago. We've got Iceland, Greenland, we've got things in England and Italy, but the top 3 spots we're going to talk about today, primarily it's going to be Ireland, Spain, and Slovenia. Right now, these are kind of my big 3. Again, we've got lots of great offerings throughout Europe, but today we're going to focus on those 3. Ireland, Spain, and Slovenia.
What are the times of year for all 3 of those spots?
Well, with all of these destinations, it's primarily a summer fishery. It's going to be very similar to what we find if you're fishing in the U.S. West or throughout the Rockies, primarily summer. So it kind of kicks off really late spring, rolls through the summer months, and oftentimes into early fall. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Slovenia, you can fish in the winter. They've actually got a really good population of hucho or taimen. They call them Danube salmon over there. But for the most part, these are summer fisheries. So think about it being similar to planning a trip to Idaho or Montana. That's kind of the time frame and the window that you're looking at.
Okay. What are the primary species that you can target at these spots?
Well, the species are kind of interesting. For the most part, we're talking about trout fishing in these European countries. We'll break it down one by one. So with Spain, primarily brown trout. Now you've got kind of 2 scenarios there. You've got the high country, the high Pyrenees fishery, where you're catching smaller, wild, indigenous, native brown trout. It's called a Mediterranean brown. They also call it a zebra brown for the black par marks that run down the side. These are not big fish, but they're absolutely gorgeous. They're wild and they love to eat dry flies. In the low country of Spain, when you move down towards the city of Grouse and you fish some of those tailwaters, you're primarily looking at larger brown trout. Still very hatch focused, lots going on with surface action, sometimes hopper dropper type action, but that's where you're going to find your bigger fish in Spain. You've got the high country and you've got the low country. Now moving on to Ireland, where there's really 2 focal points there. You've got, of course, Atlantic salmon, although the numbers aren't what they used to be. What we're really big on is the fishing in the southern part of Ireland, down around the city of Clonmel, the town of Clonmel, and County Waterford. We work with an outstanding operator down there, and they've got really phenomenal brown trout fishing. Super legit, very similar to what you would find on some of the better rivers of the U.S. West. Again, freestone rivers, lots of great dry fly action, good numbers of fish, and good sizes of fish. So that would be Southern Ireland for brown trout. Now I move further south to Slovenia. The thing about Slovenia, there are rivers everywhere, there are streams all over the country, and they all hold amazing numbers of fish. So you've got your rainbow trout, a lot of which are stocked, some are resident. You've got healthy populations of brown trout. Then the 2 species that Slovenia is very famous for, one are the indigenous marble trout, not found in too many countries, but an absolutely beautiful fish to catch. They like to eat flies and they grow to quite large sizes. And then, believe it or not, you've got taimen populations in Slovenia, the hucho. And these fish can run up to 4.5 feet long. Wild indigenous fish that are absolutely incredible, especially when you take into account you're oftentimes fishing a small stream, something you might find in the U.S. West. You might be targeting trout, but you look down into a lie or under a bridge or holding against the bank, and you see a 3 or 4 foot taimen in these rivers. So pretty spectacular. When it comes to overall diversity of species, that's where Slovenia is really going to win out.
So what type of angler or traveler would be best suited for these trips?
Well, that's a good question. I would say these trips are really a good fit for anybody, especially if you're looking for something that is a little more within a comfort zone that might not be super expeditionary or completely off the grid. Obviously, when you're spending time in Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, you're going to have all the comforts. You're going to have amazing food. You're going to have great wine. You're going to have wonderful sightseeing. And you're going to go home each night to accommodations that are absolutely fantastic.
So Jim, can you give me some examples of what you might find while you're out on the water, what you might experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's trout fishing for the most part, so expect to be in waders. The rivers could be anything from a small, high alpine stream to a wide kind of fast-moving tailwater to some of the alpine rivers of Slovenia, which can be kind of big and powerful. But there's really no float fishing on any of the rivers in these places, so everything is walk wading, which a lot of people really enjoy. Sometimes you can, hike for a couple miles, but more often than not, they're typically driving right to the stream access point. You're getting out and you're fishing right away, which is pretty nice. Makes it great for anglers of all ages, all mobility levels, all skill levels. But the neatest thing is when you're fishing a lot of these rivers, whether it's a kind of a well-known classic river in Slovenia like the Socha Valley, or something in the Pyrenees that very few people ever get to see or experience, you're just surrounded by stunning landscape. If it's in the high mountains, it's just this alpine backdrop that's absolutely gorgeous. Or you might be fishing close to some of these old medieval towns where you've got ancient castle walls and turrets and all sorts of classic European sites surrounding you. I think back to some of the rivers that we fished in southern Ireland, where you're walking past kind of abandoned, crumbling castles that, who knows how many centuries old these things are, but that is your backdrop to your fishing experience. When you're in Slovenia, oftentimes fishing right below a giant castle that's up on the hill that's overlooked this river for centuries. Well, just so happens that river holds great trout, and there you are today fishing it with that as the backdrop. So amazing scenery, and of course the backdrop of old Europe, which is something that we typically don't get to experience when we grow up fishing in the US.
Are these destinations easy to reach? What's the best way to get there, and how do you get around once you're there?
All right, so once you're in country, we'll talk about that in just a second. But the nice thing about all these European destinations is they are very easy to reach. So for example, if you're headed to Spain, you're probably flying direct into Barcelona. If you're heading to Ireland, most people fly to Dublin. You can also fly to Shannon if you're accessing the southern part of the country. In Slovenia, same thing. You're headed to Ljubljana, which is the capital city of Slovenia. Lots of flights from all throughout Europe. Easy place to reach. So fairly direct flights, pretty quick and easy to get there. Most major airlines fly either direct into those cities from major US cities or with one stop, as the case is with Slovenia. Once you arrive in country, then it very much kind of becomes planes, trains, and automobiles. It depends on where you're heading. So for example, in Spain, you arrive in Barcelona, typically you'll get on a bullet train, one of the super fast European trains they have, and you'll head about an hour and a half, either to the town of Lleida or the town of Graus, where you are met by your guide upon arrival. Ireland, similar thing. Fly into Dublin or Shannon. You are met at the airport by an outfitter, picks you up, puts you in a private vehicle, takes you to your final destination where you begin your fishing itinerary. Slovenia is the same thing. Once you arrive in Ljubljana, you're met at the airport by your outfitter. You're driven all throughout the country over the course of the week. You're going to see a lot of amazing waters, a lot of different places. And one thing that all of these destinations have in common is you're combining the fishing with the amazing cultural aspects, right? You're going to see so much of the history of old Europe. You're going to experience great food, great sightseeing, whether it's hanging out in an Irish pub or a streamside bar next to a river in Slovenia. It's really so much about the whole European and cultural experience that meshes very nicely with great fishing.
Do the outfitters provide the gear, or do anglers need to bring it when they travel there?
So gear and equipment is always a question we get quite often. The answer is yes, and why not, basically. So with all three of these destinations, in Ireland, in Spain, and Slovenia, let's say you're over as part of a larger European vacation that may be a non-angling itinerary. You want to travel light. You don't want to have to bring all your fishing gear with you. You can show up with these outfitters and they will be able to provide everything you need. Waders, boots, rods, reels. They of course supply all the flies. So you can go with that option of just showing up with nothing and using what they provide. That is not a problem. That said, these are typically European brands. I know that when I go over and fish and I use their waders, for example, I'm an XL tall with a size 13 foot. They might not have that, or their size 13 might be more like a European cut, like a size 11. So I do prefer to bring my own gear. The way I explain it to people is If I'm going over there for a focused fishing trip, and let's say I'm gonna be there a week, I'm definitely bringing my own gear, my own boots and waders, my own rods and reels, the equipment that I wanna be fishing with every day on the water. If I'm perhaps just adding a couple of days on to a larger non-angling European travel itinerary, then absolutely go with what the outfitter provides. They make it easy, they allow you to travel light.
If I am gonna bring my own gear, what should I bring?
So good question as far as what to bring. Primarily you're trout fishing. So this is kind of 4, 5, 6 weight territory for the most part. Now, depends on where you're going. So for example, if you're headed to the High Pyrenees, smaller fish, lots of dry fly fishing in tiny creeks, tiny rivers, there I might be fishing a 3 weight, 4 at the absolute max. If I'm fishing the low country of Spain, or I'm fishing some of the larger rivers in southern Ireland for big brown trout, there you're fishing either a 5 or a 6 weight for the most part. In Slovenia, same thing. 6 weights, very common, some bigger rivers, some faster moving rivers. What I'm doing in Slovenia though is I'm also bringing a 9 weight with me. Depending on the time of year, whether or not you're gonna be fishing for hucho, for the time in there, that's where I'm bringing a heavier rod, a 9 weight with a fast sink tip line, big flies. I wanna have both my trout setup and my timing setup when I'm headed to Slovenia.
What's the typical length of stay? Is there a minimum?
A lot of times people are headed to Europe for a larger travel itinerary that really might not include fishing, but they're interested in adding 2 or 3 or 4 days of fishing on to their larger European vacation. We can do that no problem. Other times people, for instance, want to head to Slovenia or Ireland and say, I want to do a dedicated week of fishing. So there is no set length of trip. There's no set arrival or departure days or changeover days. We have the ability to work with you to put together any length of trip and any itinerary that's going to work into your schedule and be a fit for what you're looking for.
What are the accommodations like in these destinations?
So accommodations are going to vary, but that's a great question. Again, depends what country you're headed to. In Ireland, for instance, you typically either stay in kind of a streamside bed and breakfast, an inn that we love that's right in the heart of trout fishing country, surrounded by the rivers that you're going to be spending your time on. Or you have the option of staying in the town of Clonmel at a nicer, larger hotel. That's great if you really want to take in the nightlife of going to the pubs and hitting the after fishing scene in Clonmel. In Spain, we typically have 2 different options. If you're in the high country, you're staying at a beautiful alpine lodge that's part of our packages. If you're staying in the low country, you're based out of the city of Graus, which is an old kind of medieval city. We stay at a beautiful restored hotel right in the heart of that city. So that's a fun thing, again, to really kind of take in the European culture and the overall European experience. With Slovenia, you have the option of staying in a countryside, family-owned, small kind of boutique hotel, or you can stay right in the heart of the small city of Kranj, where every night you're kind of going out on your own, eating at a different restaurant, visiting the bars, kind of taking in the nightlife of Kranj. So all of our European packages obviously include your in-country transfers, all of your guided fishing, use of equipment, most of your meals, depending on where you're heading and what the itinerary looks like, and of course the accommodations. And with each of these destinations, we've got a couple of great accommodation options that we work with you to really figure out what the best fit is going to be.
How do these rates compare to, say, the US West or Patagonia?
Good question about rates. I would say when you compare a similar package in either Spain, Ireland, or Slovenia, it's going to fall below the typical cost of, say, a US West trip. Certainly going to be substantially lower than a trip to Patagonia or Alaska. I really feel it's one of the best values out there as far as the type of fishing you're getting, the service, and the inclusions that are part of this package when it comes to overall value. I will tell you that of our European offerings, which are all very well priced, very competitive price-wise, Slovenia is kind of the sleeper. Slovenia is shockingly inexpensive for how amazing the trip is and how nice everything is once you get there.
If I'm traveling with a non-angler, are there activities or experiences available for them while they're there as well?
Yeah, the non-angling question is a good one, and that's probably the biggest draw of these European programs. Non-anglers, why not Europe, right? There's so much to see and do. And forever, I feel like most people went to Europe for very much a non-angling trip, whether it was couples trip, family trip, just kind of trekking around, going by train and visiting different countries. Until recently, I think a lot of anglers, and especially American anglers, didn't realize how good the fishing was over there. The fact is, there's so much to find in all three of these countries. If you spend any time, for example, in Southern Ireland, the high country of the Pyrenees in Spain, and certainly anywhere in Slovenia, if you're an angler and you don't bring a fly rod with you or you don't have an opportunity to fish, you're going to be kicking yourself, because as soon as you get there, you look around, you see just how good it is, and you're going to want to be fishing. So for non-anglers, absolutely. One of the things we deal with a lot is, let's say we have two couples that want to go over to Spain. Maybe you have two anglers out of the two couples that want to spend their day on the water. The non-anglers want to have activities and want to be guided for all the cultural sites, for the trekking, the hiking, the museums, whatever it may be. So all of our itineraries can include both an angling element and a non-angling element, all of which will be fully guided. Everyone in the group will be well taken care of, and you're going to check the boxes for exactly what you're looking for with your European vacation.
So Jim, could you give me some examples of what might be available for the non-angler?
Yeah, I mean, the non-angling activities that you're going to find in all these places, Sam, are just endless. For example, if you're in Ireland, again, anglers might be out for the day. Non-anglers, we can set up all sorts of tours, from visiting the Waterford Crystal Factory to day hikes that take you throughout the rolling foothills of Southern Ireland. Obviously, you have everything in Dublin, which is only 2 hours from where most of our fishing takes place in County Waterford. Endless numbers of non-angling activities, and something that can really make it fun for a mixed group when you do have anglers and non-anglers. The Pyrenees and the Aragon region of Spain, same thing. You have got wineries where you can do tours. You've got amazing restaurants. You've got endless numbers of museums and cathedrals and all sorts of sightseeing that can either be incorporated in with the fishing package or can run concurrent with the fishing package, again, if you have a split group looking to do different things. In Slovenia is one that a lot of people just don't know about. Sometimes people think that Slovenia is kind of like in Eastern Europe somewhere. It's not. It's Southern Europe. It's classic old school Europe. It's surrounded by Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. The history, the sights, the character of Slovenia is absolutely incredible. From visiting castles to the high alpine passes headed over to the Socha Valley. So many things to see and do in Slovenia, and of course, amazing food. So it makes it a really special trip.
Well, thanks again for the time today, Jim. It was great talking with you about Europe.
Absolutely, Sam. It's a program we're really excited about here at Yellow Dog. Some great new introductions. We've been to all these destinations. We've vetted them. It's something for people, especially in this day and age where, so much focus is on off the grid, crazy, exciting, expeditionary new destinations. There's a lot to be said for the comfort and tradition and history of old Europe. And the fishing is incredibly legit. We've got great guides, great infrastructure, everything to really make it a legitimate fly fishing trip, coupled with the interesting aspects of a European vacation. So give us a call at Yellow Dog. We'd love to work with you on European options, talk you through the process, and see if we can't come up with an incredible itinerary that'll show you the best of fishing in these amazing places.